So thank you so much, Cynthia, for the introduction, and thank you all for being here tonight. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about messages from the other side. It's just going to be some different ideas and just some different things that I think about. And a lot of times I say this when I do a presentation or a talk is this is a lot, you know, because I want to talk about these things and present them to you guys. But also I do it for me. It's a reinforcement for myself. It's you know, I need a lot of reminders and a lot of, you know, just affirmations and just constant, you know, kind of just being in charge of your thoughts and the ideas that you have, and trying to, you know, be better, and trying to find the right way to face challenges in your life. And so I do enjoy doing the talks from this perspective, because it gives me an opportunity to study. It gives me an opportunity to strengthen my own faith and my own beliefs, and also to bring some of these ideas to you guys. So the first thing that I'm going to read here is actually some lines from Heaven and Hell, the first chapter. And this is, I believe this is the very first line in the book. And it says, "It is certain that we live, think, and act. It is also certain that we shall die." I kind of, whenever I bring some content from a lot of the Spiritist books, I change the words a lot because it makes it a lot easier to read. They can be very difficult to read and understand sometimes, so I do have liberty with the message. So, "It is certain that we live, think, and act. It is also certain that we shall die. But on leaving the earth, where shall we go? What will become of us? Shall we continue to exist, or shall we cease to exist?" So it's funny. I have some family members that they believe in the afterlife. They believe in spirits, and they believe, you know, in prayer and you know, sometimes praying to certain you know, saints, and certain things, you know, can cause certain things to happen, or you know, to help you maybe move forward with a certain situation. And I ask them, I say, when I talk to them about this, I say, so if you believe that, where are those spirits right now? And they look at me, and it's like, well, aren't they in heaven? And then sometimes they say that, and I say, well, sometimes spirits can have a bad influence, right? And I say, are those spirits in heaven too? And they say, no, probably not. And I said, so if they're not, you know, heaven and hell, you know, those are extremes of an idea. You know, we're trying to achieve heaven, right? We're trying to better ourselves to perfection, so to speak. And hell is kind of something that we create for ourselves, you know, from our own guilt and our own, you know, regrets. But if they're not in heaven or in hell, you know, I you know, where are they? And I ask this question, and people, they don't think about it. It's like, well, they have to be somewhere, you know. They're right. So, they're, you know, a lot of us know, you know, they're in the spiritual realm, and you know, the spiritual realm is very complex. There are many different, you know, planes and spheres, and even different planets that we can, you know, incarnate on and experience different things. So another thing I ask is I say, so that means that if you believe in spirits, and you believe that you can actually, in some form or another, communicate with them, that means that they're still alive. And, you know, sometimes their heads are just like, I never thought about that, you know, because they're not physical anymore, we don't see them anymore, but they're still existing, they're still interacting with us. So in some form or another, they're still alive. So it's very interesting, you know, even a lot of beliefs that we grow up with, and they're instilled in us throughout our entire life, we don't actually put a lot of thought to it. We don't actually, like, you know, stop and say, hey, why do I believe that? Why don't we question these things? So this is the kind of the thing that I'm kind of aiming for with this talk today. So I found this interesting poll. The numbers aren't that up to date, I believe these numbers were from like before the year 2000, but I still found it very interesting because it kind of plays into what I'm bringing today. But in this poll, this particular question, it asked, is it your personal belief that there will be a future existence of some kind after death? And as you see here, they asked different denominations, different religions, what they believed. And I tried to find updated numbers for this question, but I couldn't find it broken down how this one was broken down. But I found it interesting because a lot of us, Spiritists, they do have a Christian or a Catholic background, but there are many other Christians and other non-Christians here. But I found it interesting, the answers to this question. The Catholics, they said 77.5% yes, and only 9% of them said no, belief in a future existence of some kind after death. The Baptists, they yes said 70.7% and no said 11.6%. Mormons were very high up there. The yes was 92% and only 1.5% of them said no. The numbers don't add up to 100% because there was two other categories that were no answer and also unsure. So unsure and no answer at all was the other two categories. Jewish people, they were a little bit lower. They were about 65% said yes, they believe in life after death in some form or another. No said 16.7%. And non-religious, non-affiliation spiritual people, overwhelmingly they said no, that they did not believe in some kind of life after death. So I just thinking about these numbers, it's interesting how we're raised and how, I guess, kind of like what kind of a paradigm you're kind of brought up in. It kind of affects your beliefs growing up. And a lot of times people have a hard time separating themselves from what they were brought up in. So I'm going to read another quote from the book Heaven and Hell. And this says, belief in a future life is instinctive in the human mind. But as people have had no clear and sufficient ground for these beliefs until fairly recently, their imagination has shaped and has led to the various religious systems that have given rise to the wide diversities of human worship. So when I was in high school, I found myself asking these questions. I was raised Catholic. I was a Christian, and I was I guess about 16, 17 years old, and I was starting to ask these questions because reincarnation I was asking questions about reincarnation, and my faith wasn't answering these questions, but I felt strongly that there was some truth to it. And those questions were not being answered. So a lot of times when people, like I was saying, they're raised in a certain belief system and they come across these questions, they often ask themselves, well, if I don't think that what I was taught is entirely true, what else is there, right? And what happens is, a lot of times when people start asking these questions and they don't get the answers that they're so desperately, desiring, they sometimes just block out the whole thing. They say, well, there's something missing here, and a lot of them just either reject religion altogether. A lot of them, do become spiritual without really believing in God, and some of them, they claim to be atheists, which is funny because. I don't think a person could actually truly, call themselves an atheist. As proud as they may be to say it and, to say, hey, I don't believe in God, I think it's all, BS and all that. It's to have a conviction in something that to where you say, oh, I don't believe in this. It's almost like saying, oh, I don't believe in atoms. People used to believe that. They said, oh, everything is made up of little tiny particles that make up your body and make up the matter and material. And people said, oh, no, I don't believe in atoms. Like, that can't be true. Like, it's God put us here. It's all magic. Don't think about it. It's don't worry about it. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing here. It's people call themselves atheists and they say, "Oh, I don't believe in God. Like, he can't exist." Well, how do you know? Right? It's like you're already completely rejecting something. And a lot of us don't even know. A lot of us don't know a lot. There's a lot of things we don't know. Socrates was famous for saying, he was famous for saying, or somebody said about him that he was one of the smartest men alive because he admitted that he didn't know anything. And another reason too, whenever people start asking these questions about their faith and their belief systems, is they start looking at what that religion stands for. They start looking at the history of that religion, and not to to criticize anything too harshly or to dwell on one particular religion. If you look at Catholicism, they committed many crimes throughout history. Even today, up to this day, you have issues where with children in the church and them being mistreated, and I'm being generous with those words. People see those things and they say, this is what I'm associating myself with, and they say I can't have any part of this. So they reject it. They become atheists. And even a lot of the stories in the Bible itself, they're very simplistic and very hard to believe, hard to read. Of course, those are written in a different time, but it's difficult. It's difficult. So whenever people are faced with these things and they're faced with these questions that they're not getting answers for, a lot of them, they just turn away from it. They reject everything, and they don't give it a second look. So this is a book by a self-proclaimed atheist. His name is Sam Harris. He is a neuroscientist. He's also obviously an author, and he has a podcast. He does a lot of lectures and talks and debates with different people, and he's pretty prominent person, and very very intelligent. He talks about all different subjects, not just religion. And very intelligent, very thoughtful person. And he writes this book called Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. So even though a lot of people may reject God but are still kind of spiritual, it's something is still missing from their life. They're still missing a huge part of what they believe in. So a lot of atheists now, they're experimenting with meditation. They're experimenting with mindfulness. They're experimenting with kind of going through the whole process of kind of manifesting your day. Kind of thinking of positive things that are going to happen in their life. And I think that that eventually what's going to happen is the more that they go down this road, the more they're going to start opening themselves up to new experiences. The more that they're going to start realizing that there is more to life than just our bodies and ourselves. There's something else. There's something not just spiritual, but something divine inside of us, something divine in the world. And the more that they are open to those ideas, the more that the truth will arise, the more that the truth will emerge. So here's another message from Heaven and Hell, the first chapter. And it says, the Spiritist doctrine of the future life is not a work of imagination engendered ingeniously conceived, but is, on the contrary, deduced from and confirmed by the observation of physical facts that are now occurring before our very eyes. So just before the other quote that I had from Heaven and Hell, it was talking about how humans fill the gaps in their religion and their beliefs with their own imagination. And that leads to a lot of problems because it's not really backed up by anything. It's more of just maybe someone in power or a powerful priest, or they make certain changes, and maybe they make little revisions here and there in the Bible and certain other scriptures and whatnot, and they start slowly getting away from the truth. They start slowly getting away from the facts that are being brought to them from the spiritual world. And I mean, you can even see just by all the different denominations of religion there are. I mean, you have Christianity, and there's, I don't know, like over 300 different denominations of Christianity. So people get a piece of truth, they incorporate their imagination to it, and then they come up with different ideas, and some of them have different inspirations. They do receive messages from the divine and higher realms, and they realize that what they're being taught maybe might not be true, and they want to kind of go in a different direction. So all these different denominations end up proliferating. But here, what it's talking about here, the observation of physical facts that are now occurring in front of our very eyes, we have a lot of evidence, and I know that a lot of people here we're familiar with them. But I think the more that we explore these ideas, and the more people open up themselves to them, the more that the truth will reveal itself to more and more people who aren't necessarily believers. And some of those things that are the physical evidence that we see and we experience. One of them is nicknamed phantom phone calls. This is when people sometimes receive messages or phone calls from family members who passed away or are deceased. Recently, in that terrible building collapse in Surfside, just South Florida, there was a family who was receiving phone calls from their parents who were living in the building, and they ended up receiving a total of 16 phone calls. And it wasn't like from a cell phone. It was from the landline, like in the condo. Like the landline was calling the cell phone, and they would answer the phone. There wouldn't be any response, but they were receiving calls. They got 16 phone calls. So I mean, that to me, I don't know how you can explain that. We have deathbed accounts, people on their deathbed about to pass away. A lot of times they report seeing family members around them. They report seeing different beings. They report seeing different lights. And there have been a lot of psychologists and also doctors who have been by their side while they're going through this process, and they say things that they can't explain. They sometimes see family members of the doctor and tell them, hey, I see this person here with you, he's helping you. And a lot of doctors have started to come out and talking about these accounts because there really is no other explanation except for proof of the existence of life after death. Of course, we have transcommunication, where we record messages, or we receive messages physically, either like a voice recording or a video recording or images from the spiritual world. A lot of times there'll be some kind of session or like a meeting trying to invite some type of communication when people do these. And there have been some really incredible results of that. Pictures of people who have passed away that have come back, recordings, people who have recorded their parents on tape, and they, of course, it's a very personal experience. It's very difficult to try to explain this type of thing to someone else, right? Like if you hear a voice on a recording and say, hey, it's my dad's voice who passed away, and you are 100% sure that is the case, it's very difficult to convey that to someone else. They it's almost unbelievable, right? It is unbelievable. I mean, it is incredible, but not unbelievable. One of the things they use for transcommunication is these little spirit boxes that I have mentioned before, and these are tools that people use when they try to do communications with those who have passed away, and I mean, some of the stories that you hear from the work that people do with spirit boxes is incredible. I mean, they say that there's too many intelligent responses they receive, you know, with that device, that it can't be a fluke. They say that they're asking questions and they're getting, you know, intelligent responses. They're getting intelligent answers back. People are touching on mediums too with the spirit box. A lot of times it does have to do with the person who is using the device, depending on how sensitive they are and how much mediumistic faculties they have. But any regular person can do it. There have been amazing stories. Even think about the celebrations that we have, you know, the observances that we have, the Day of the Dead, the Dia de los Muertos that they celebrate in Mexico and some other parts in the Central and South America. Halloween, the Christian holiday All Souls Day. There used to be a lot more emphasis on those people who have passed away, a lot more reverence, a lot more remembering them that when they have passed away. You know, it's not. Someone passes away, yes, it's a terrible thing, but you can also remember them fondly. You can also, you know, think about them, you know, in good spirits. A lot of times when we think about those who have passed away in a negative way, or very, very sadly, they sometimes dwell. They sometimes aren't able to move on. So it's interesting, you know. We have these celebrations that specifically are dedicated to those who have passed away, and if they're just dead and gone and their spirits are gone, then why do we have so much celebration around those types of things and those concepts? So just thinking about all these actual, you know, physical, you know, proofs and evidence. I mean, I know for a lot of us, you know, we don't need any convincing, right? You know, we firmly believe in the spiritual world, a lot of us, and but the physical evidence is there. I mean, there have even been thought experiments. There's been meditation experiments. There's been all kinds of other things that have you know, shown fruit. But the problem with these types of things is when it comes to science is that science is all about replication, and it's very difficult to replicate these types of results because they're not really tangible. They're not really, you know, there's not really a lot of strong evidence. The results are hard to recreate, and a lot of times the person who is involved in the experience is the reason why it's happening at all.
Oh, Manny, there is one very popular now, which are the security surveillance cameras. The people are catching like furniture moving and bars and stuff. It's very popular.
Really?
On YouTube. Yeah.
Wow.
And if you look for real ghosts caught on camera, on video, and you're gonna find a lot.
Yeah.
All over the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it.
Camera,
yeah, for those who couldn't hear, who are listening online, someone mentioned there's a lot of videos, security footage, and other videos of recordings of furniture moving and different things happening. I remember too, there was somebody in one of our study groups a couple years ago. They had a security camera in their apartment, and then it was just on randomly, and then the person was going through the footage, and there was like an orb that you saw. It like came through the door from the outside and like floated around the room and then went back through the same door. And then, I mean, there was no there's no explanation for it. I mean, it was so bizarre. But I mean, maybe bizarre isn't the right word. It was so not bizarre.
They'll be the regular people saying.
For a regular person, it'd be
What do you mean?
it'd be bizarre. Yeah, But it was incredible to see that, and I mean, a lot of people have said that. They've said they've taken pictures and they've seen orbs in the picture. You know, they've seen orbs in their room or around, and could be a spirit, you know, nearby. Most likely it is. So I came across this really interesting story about reincarnation, which I didn't have listed there. Reincarnation is another form of evidence that we have, and I think that the evidence for reincarnation really it's overwhelming. How many stories there are? There are accounts and stories that families have told and have gone through of children that they've had that have passed away, that have somehow seemingly reincarnated back into the family. I mean, just things that are just almost beyond explanation unless you actually believe in this type of thing. But like I said, I think the evidence regarding that is overwhelming. There's plenty of cases that show evidence of reincarnation. And I'm going to share with you one that I came across that coincidentally happened in Brazil to a family that had 13 children. So the location was in Brazil. Amelia was the first child of the family, if I'm remembering this correctly. And Amelia disincarnated in October 12, 1921. The name of the incarnated was Paulo, and he was born on February 3rd, 1923. So I have some information that I probably shouldn't have put up there right away, but I'll just go ahead and read it now because I know you guys are looking at it. But when Amelia passed away, she actually committed suicide. And for some reason, when she was alive, Amelia, she was a girl. She was never really comfortable in her own body for whatever reason. She had some previous suicide attempts because she just didn't really feel like, comfortable, like she belonged. And right, so what happened is after she passed away, her mom started going to these like spiritual meetings, and her mom, come to find out, was a medium herself, and she started receiving these messages from Amelia. The person who she receiving was calling herself Amelia, and during several of the sessions, I believe it was at least 3, the person who was presenting themselves as Amelia said verbatim, "Mama, take me as your son, I will come as your son." And this happened on 3 different occasions. So after Amelia died, they had 11 other kids, and they weren't planning on having any other children. But a few years later, after Amelia had taken her own life, they did have one last child, and his name was Paulo. And there were a lot of interesting things about Paulo. One of the things that stood out was throughout his younger years, up until he was about 4 or 5 years old, he completely refused to wear boys' clothes at all. He would not wear them. I put here pants made from a skirt. So there was a skirt that Amelia used to wear, and then the family made a pair of pants out of the skirt, and that was the first piece of boys' clothing that the boy would wear. So after he wore the pants made from the skirt of Amelia's skirt, then after that, that's when he started finally wearing boys' clothes. And another interesting thing was the family they had some very talented like seamstresses and people who sewed in the family, and Amelia was like an expert. She showed like a proficiency in sewing that there were several other daughters in the family that they tried to teach to sew, and none of them showed the expertise that Amelia ever showed. And once Paulo was born, and he was last in the family of a dozen children, he showed the same proficiency in sewing without ever being taught how to sew that Amelia had. And I have some accounts here of from the family of how Paulo was with the family. So here are some comments from the family. So going back to Amelia real quick, when I was mentioning she was very uncomfortable being in her own body, being in a feminine body, she was, for some reason, she was very, very good at making boys' clothes and men's clothes, but she wasn't as good as making women's clothes. Like, she showed a really strong proficiency to make boys' clothes. Apparently, one reason why is that Amelia wanted to be a man. As a woman in Brazil in the earliest... okay, I'll skip that one. So Amelia had exhibited great skill in sewing and owned the only sewing machine in the family. Several witnesses testified to the precocious competence of Paulo in sewing. Lola, the mom, recalled that when Paulo was extremely small and a servant of the family was trying clumsily to work the sewing machine, he pushed her aside, showed her how to work the machine, and made a small sack with it. Another person of the family, two people of the family recalled that once when Paulo was about 4 years old, a woman was having difficulty in threading the machine, and Paulo, at 4 years old, showed her how to do it. Another person in the family recalled that once Martha was one of the girls in one of the daughters in the family, left the sewing machine with some unfinished embroidery on it. In her absence, Paulo finished the work. She left. All the above 3 episodes occurred before Paulo had ever had any lessons in sewing. Another person recalled seeing Paulo working Emily's sewing machine before he had any lessons. She stated that she asked Paulo how he could sew without lessons, and he replied, "I already knew how to sew." And then there was another account where someone was asking him about the sewing machine and how he knew how to sew, and he said, "This is my sewing machine," when it was the exact sewing machine that belonged to Amelia. So this story also stood out to me because there was another case of reincarnation in the family that I won't get into, but there was another daughter who passed away and was supposedly reincarnated as another one of the daughters, and she had some mediumistic faculties, and she would even say, "I'm this person, that I came back," and would say some other very telling things about the past and the family that really, this is why this case was studied and brought to light, was because it wasn't just one case in the family, it was 2. And I would say 2 strong cases. And hearing these things and being a skeptic, it's very easy to say, maybe the family just made this up, or maybe they were mistaken. I don't see how a family would want to draw this type of attention to themselves. I mean, there's not really a lot of fame and fortune involved with these types of phenomenon and when in these testimonies, more so it's disbelief, it's ridicule. It's being ousted as just strange and odd. So when I hear these stories, I just have a natural tendency, and I probably most of you do too, just to believe it, because to me I don't see how a person can make up a story like this. There's way too much just nuance there for it to be just a complete fabrication. So I find these stories very interesting, and there are many other cases. Many famous mediums throughout history, like Edgar Cayce, and just speaking of the American ones, of course, Chico Javier and others. The messages that they bring forward are just too powerful. They're too real. I mean, they just, when you hear them, they just touch you right to your soul and your core. I mean, it just, I don't know. If you don't feel something, I mean, I guess it's with good reason. There's plenty of reason to disbelieve, you know, with the society that we live in and the way that we've been brought up. But I think it's a lot of evidence pointing towards the reality of reincarnation. So why do we live so many lives?
To grow.
To grow? To become independent? Raphael, what do you think?
To learn more.
To learn more? You can't accomplish that just in just one life?
No.
No?
It would be hard.
It's too much, right?
Too much.
Yeah, it's too much information. So I wanted to read something from No Solar, and this is from the introduction, a message from Andre Luis. And it answers this question. It answers the question, why do we live so many lives? And here are just some pieces from the introduction from Andre Luis. He says, life never ceases. A great river follows its course before joining the immense sea. Likewise, the soul also follows its course of various roads and goes through different stages. It too receives streams of knowledge here and there, augmenting the way it expresses itself and purifying its character before reaching the eternal ocean of wisdom. Changing out of the physical cloak does not solve the fundamental problem of enlightenment. Because changing out of one's cloak, meaning the physical body, has nothing to do with the profound solutions to the problems of destiny and being. Paths of souls, mysterious ways of the heart. It is necessary to travel them before attempting the supreme equation of eternal life. It is crucial that you live out their drama, that you know them detail by detail during the long process of spiritual perfection. We need these experiences, right? We are stubborn. This is my words, not from the book. You know, we're stubborn, right? We need constant reminders. We need constant, affirmations. We need to personally experience different challenges so that we understand how they feel to us, so we understand how the people around us feel. And even going back to the question of reincarnation and how these people come forward with these stories, this is another reason why we do live so many lives is, we have a hard time trusting each other. We have a hard time believing each other. Somebody comes to you with a story about something and that's very personal and, meaningful to them, and we shrug it off like it didn't happen to me. I didn't see it, so I can't believe that. That's what a lot of people say. That's why we need to experience things for ourselves. That's why we live so many lives. And there's a lot to learn, right? Like some of you said. And there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to forgive, too. A lot of things that happen to us that people do and that we assume things, but there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of love that we still have to embrace, a lot of forgiveness that we have to embrace as well. So continuing with Andre Luis's message, he says, how many lives, how many bodies, how many centuries, how many tasks, how many triumphs, and how many deaths do we still need? Alas, everywhere there are those who are learned in doctrine, but illiterate in spirit. Our poor efforts aim only to give us an idea of that fundamental truth. And the human existence presents a great number of fragile vessels that cannot yet contain the whole truth. So that's us right now. We have an idea of the divine. It's in us. we have an idea of the afterlife and the spiritual world, but we're not anywhere near done learning and experiencing these things. Many of us are farther along than others, but these types of things are things that I need to remind myself. You know, that we are, in reality, we are surrounded by our loved ones. They are here supporting us, sometimes hurting us if we allow that, and it never ceases to amaze me, you know, when I go about living my life, that this is a reality. You know, everyone here has an entourage with them, right? Of disincarnated family, friends. They visit you. They come here. They try to continue learning. They're finding their path. And sometimes it's we help them. You know, it's up to us to continue, you know, living, you know, honestly and you know, lovingly and forgiving, because they're watching us. They're here. They're learning from us too. We're helping them learn, and it's I think it's a very important aspect of life, and it's scary too. You know, like I don't want to think about that when I'm doing you know, my things that you know, no one knows about. You know, that you know, there's family members watching me, and you know, they're there, you know, watching, and it's scary. You know, that's another reason why people don't even want to touch reincarnation. They don't even want to touch this kind of stuff, because you're telling me now that we don't pass away and they're following you everywhere. It's no, thank you. I'll just close that book, and I'll just go somewhere else. But it was interesting. I had that poll earlier, and there was another question they had asked, and one of the questions, which I thought it was so strange that they had asked the people this, but they said, do you believe that religious observances or religious practices can affect those who are dead? And a lot of them said yes, which I found to be it to be pretty incredible, because a lot of those religions don't really emphasize that type of thing. You know, they don't. You know, Baptists and Catholics and Christians, reincarnation isn't really a topic. It's not really like a theme of those religions. But yet, those religious people, they still believed that what they did here in the physical world would affect them on the other side. So I thought that was very interesting. So, yeah, does anyone have any questions about anything? Or any comments? Any stories?
Isn't it interesting that we more connected to the material world? We don't have those celebrations of the dead that you were mentioning in the beginning. But the primitive nations, like the indigenous people, like in Amazon, there is a region, there is a huge festival of the dead called the Quadhuq. It's very famous in the world, and it's about a month where all the tribes, they come together.
This is in Brazil?
Yeah, it's in Amazon. They do things together for a month, and they are actually, there is a celebration where they all the family, all the generation, one generation, big generation, they all cry for all the deaths. And they stay crying like for a while, crying. And then after that, they stop crying and they gonna, you know, do all the celebrations. But they
do they give like offerings too?
No, not
like David.
much. It's more like it's a celebration in dancing, and it's more of strength games and those kind of things. But they respect a lot the dead ones, but it's interesting how the more materialistic we become, less we pay attention less and less to those things.
Right. Yeah, it's very when you don't believe in the afterlife, it can sometimes lead to a very selfish life, because you're only worried about what you can get and accomplish in this life. Some people, they say, well, when you die, that's the end. So I might as well make as much money and have as much fun now as I can, and forget about everybody else. Yeah, YOLO. Yeah, you only live once, right? That's what people say. But I mean, we know that's not true. We know that putting thought into the afterlife and our progress in this life is very important. And I've even found myself, doing the opposite. I do believe in reincarnation. I believe in, in the afterlife. But I sometimes say, oh, well, I don't have to work on that this life because I'll just come back and do it on my the next life. It's like, it's like this. I'm like, it's the law. So, if I don't get it right this life, I'll have another chance in another life. But I mean,
On the next.
yeah, which is a terrible attitude to have. We should like they say, don't leave for tomorrow what you can do today, right? So, but at the very least, trying to make yourself better every day and trying to be a better person. Not comparing yourself to others necessarily, but compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Be better than who you were yesterday. And I always say this a lot, and I repeat myself because it's a reminder for myself. As I said earlier, it's forgive more, love more. Forgiveness is a huge thing, and we like to hold on to grudges. It feels so good to hold on to that grudge and hate that person or dislike that person, but just let it go. Like forgive them. Just let it go. It's not doing you any favors holding on to that resentment and that hate and that guilt. And I'll just say one last thing. About what Cynthia said about that celebration of the dead. Like take Halloween, for example, in the United States and in some other countries where it's celebrated. We have no idea where the origins of that holiday came from. Like we have candy and we have costumes and like that's it. It's like a fun day. But the belief was that around that time of Halloween was that the veil or the curtain between the physical world and the spiritual world was very thin during that time. So spirits could cross over more easily. And the candy was like an offering. So you give candy and different treats, and that's offering for the spirits to keep them happy. And then for the bad spirits, you have the jack-o'-lanterns with the candle to keep them at bay. So that's really where those things come from. But now it's just kids walking around in costumes and eating candy, but we have no we have no idea where it came from. So even asking a question about a fun holiday like Halloween can sometimes have a lot of interesting answers. So I appreciate everybody for listening, and that's all I have for today. Thank you so much.